Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Visit Blinds.com now for up to 45% off site-wide, plus a free professional measure. Rules and restrictions apply.
When you think about meal kit companies, what do you see? Probably long, complicated recipes and subscriptions you can't escape. But with the new Blue Apron, we're doing meal delivery differently. No subscription needed. Faster, easier meals. And the same dedication to quality we've always had. Shop 100+ meals at blueapron.com. Get 50% off your first 2 orders with code APRON50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Howay the podcast. You've got a different voice in the host chair this time. It's me, Jonny Hawley, in case you couldn't recognise my wonderful dulcet tones, stepping in as a last-minute substitute for Mr. Henderson, who we wish all the very best in his endeavours that are keeping him away from the podcast. Alongside me, I have got another couple of gentlemen to introduce, but first, let's lay out the agenda for today's podcast. So, obviously, we've got a news update for you. There's been plenty of stories in the Sunderland ecosystem over the first couple of weeks of January. As you can imagine, there's transfer links that are starting to pop up left, right and centre and trying to play whack-a-mole and work out which ones are total nonsense and which ones have any degree of truth to them is, as always, every transfer window, an extremely fun and definitely not exhausting job that everybody loves trying to do. And we've also, obviously, as well, as we record this, Regis Libris has done his press conference before the Crystal Palace game this weekend, so we'll do a little bit of chat about that as well. And that leaves me with nothing else to do but begin the introductions. First up, alongside me, I have Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Jonny. This is a bit like when you get a substitute teacher, isn't it? You know, everybody's a little bit unsure. Is he going to be a good one or is he going to be a pain in the backside?
Well, you haven't even sat in your assigned seats according to the seating plan, so, you know, I might have to start getting strict on your early doors.
I'll do better, don't worry. I don't want me name in the bad books already.
Well, don't worry, it's just a verbal warning at this point. Also, joining us, we have Bomber himself. Bomber, how are you doing, mate?
Hello, Jonny. Yeah, I'm all right. So 2 things first before we start. Firstly, there's not a chance that with the amount of podcasts and fan recordings and videos that you're on all over social media that people don't recognise your dulcet tones. And secondly, if you are a substitute teacher, then me and Andrew have full permission to play you up because you won't be here next week.
Yeah, exactly. All I can do is start sending notes to the big boys, to Gav and to Chris and to Martin to sprag on yous and
send us to the head teacher.
Yeah, that's it. Right. With the pleasantries out of the way, shall we launch straight into some transfer chat? So there's been, like I said, there's been a few stories that have been blown around already. A few of them focused on some of our homegrown players. So the first place that we'll start is with Anthony Patterson. So Alan Nixon, you know, take what we're about to say with a pinch of salt, but Alan Nixon is reporting that there's a potential loan move open for Pato to Millwall in the Championship. Obviously, Anthony Patterson, somebody who has played a lot of football for Sunderland, obviously was our first choice for a number of seasons, slipped down the pecking order this time round, obviously due to the fantastic form of Robin Roof since he's come in. Firstly, I suppose, where do you see Patterson's future? Do you think he's got a future at the club long term? And if not, do you think a loan move to the Championship and Millwall in particular sounds like something that would suit the lad?
I think from his point of view, a loan to the Championship and a loan to somebody like Millwall, who last time I checked are near the top and pushing for promotion, I think that would be good for him. It's a situation he's used to. He's been in teams pushing at the right end of the Championship. Whether it's the right thing or not for us or his long-term career, I'm not too sure. He's done the Championship now. You know, unless he's desperate to start playing games again, and I don't think he needs to because he's still quite young. I don't know. I don't know if long term that would lead to anything for him going to Millwall. So it's a long way from home as well, you know. So unless he's really, really struggling, not getting game time, I don't know if it would quite make sense for him. Certainly, as a club, I don't think it makes sense. He is more than adequate, I feel, as backup. So if he was to go, that would then leave us trying to find somebody to fill that position. And there could potentially be a future for him still. We've not seen him at Premier League level, Johnny. We don't know. Have these last few months where he's not been in the firing line and he's been training with a new goalkeeping coach, he's been training alongside Roops, has he kicked on? And is he now ready to take that step? We're not going to find out anytime soon, hopefully, because obviously we don't want Roofs out. But we're certainly not going to find out if he goes back to the Championship and plays a few games for Millwall.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, isn't it? I mean, it's not like he's an 18, 19-year-old kid who needs development. We have seen him perform at that level for Sunderland, so it's a difficult one. I mean, Bomber, in terms of the keeper spot in general, like Andrew says, we don't want to see him involved because we want to see Roofs playing. But he also does raise the point that, you know, if he is to leave, then, you know, that's going to be a hole in the squad that's going to have to be filled. So where do you sit on sort of the second choice keeper position for us in the short term in this season and looking forward to next season? Because obviously Patterson, it's a live situation, isn't it? We're going to be hearing speculation whether he's here in the summer or whether he's already gone, and it's going to be a position we've got to address. So where are you at with this?
Yeah, so I think he was linked before Christmas as well with Southampton, if I remember rightly. So there's a number of Championship clubs who are credited with interest in him, and I think of all the potential outgoings, this one is probably the most interesting because it will give a full indication of where the club is at. I don't think, in terms of that goalkeeping position, I don't think there's obviously no question that Robin Roofs is number one. I don't think there's any question that Anthony Patterson is number two. So no sensible, forward-thinking Premier League club is going to let their second-choice goalkeeper go unless, one, they're forcing a move, or two, you have something in your back pocket lined up, you know, a domino that will fall should Anthony Patterson go. Because, no disrespect, but if Patterson does go, that leaves us with Simon Moore and Blondie, and there were questions over whether they were Championship goalkeepers at the time, let alone Premier League goalkeepers. And I know as a third choice, and I know Simon Moore himself will tell you that he's third choice goalkeeper and he's happy to be there when need be and dig in training and contribute where he's asked to. But he knows that he's third choice. And Blondie, yeah, he's a young keeper who's almost certainly not ready for Premier League football. So if the club lets Patterson go, it's because we're probably going to bring somebody else in. Because I also don't see us sanctioning a loan deal for just for the rest of the season unless there's an obligation to buy at the end of it. Because why would we leave ourselves short for the second half of the season when we've got, you know, dare I say it, a European push? I feel so alien to say that, but you know, if those European places this season go down to 9th place, there's every chance that that's what we're fighting for. So why would we leave ourselves short? And a suspension or an injury to Robin Roofs needs us having to rely on either a young kid who was, let's be honest, like I said, unproven at Championship level, or with Simon Moore, who's somebody who's happy to sit there and be third choice and, you know, chip in and contribute when he needs to. It leaves a massive hole and one that I don't think we can plug internally. So, like I said, if he goes, whether it's on loan or it's a loan with an option to buy, et cetera, then my expectation would be that there's another goalkeeper coming in, somebody who's experienced that is happy to sit and be a number two. Because that, as I said, just to come full circle, there's not a solid Premier League, forward-thinking Premier League team that does not have two good goalkeepers. as a first and a reserve. There's none that I can think of anyway. Certainly in the more established teams, or the ones that are actually doing something, who have a reserve goalkeeper who's an unproven, or I don't want to say a nobody because they're not nobodies, but you know what I mean. In the context of this conversation, so we need to keep him unless we're going to bring somebody in who's as good, if not better, with proven Premier League experience, who's happy to be a number 2 behind Robin Roofs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, as a supply teacher, if you keep talking about European pushes, you'll keep us nice and happy, so there'll be no discipline at the end of this one. But again, it's a good point, like, Bomber, you know, you can't be leaving yourself short above anything else. And as you know, Labris himself talks quite often about, and we'll get on to what he said in the press conference, but he speaks even then about how, you know, oh, well, the market's a shifting thing and things have to be right for not just a player, but a club, and, you know, the selling club, the buying club, and everything's got to align. So it does feel like one of those where it will be difficult maybe to find the right move from our point of view more than anybody else. But sticking on the theme of academy players, obviously Dan Neil is a man who's had some conversations had around him throughout the season. Obviously not really played much football. I think he's made, 3 Premier League appearances, I think, but the total minutes is probably not far off 3. He's been very underused, and his contract's up in the summer. And this has been something that's rumbled since the playoff final, really, or even before. There have been, murmurings about negotiations. It seems like we're at a point now where the contract isn't going to be signed, and it feels like that things have accelerated and the club will be looking to move him on this month. So, Andrew, there's been reports that I've seen shared on Sky Sports that I think have originated in Germany, that clubs in Germany are looking at Dan Neil. Cologne was one of the teams that I saw mentioned, exploring the idea of a permanent move for Dan Neil. And there's also been other stories that have circulated in England that, there's been interest supposedly from the Championship and north of the border as well. Rangers have been credited with an interest in Dan Neil also. So like I say, everything looks like it's moving to a permanent departure for Dan Neil from Sunderland. Out of the options that have been mentioned, so, staying local, going to Scotland, going to continental Europe, which of those, which seems just the most obvious to you, the one that has that ring of truth straight away?
Oh, that's a good question, that, sir.
Gold star on Andrew's chart.
Yeah. I've noticed as well, you're wearing a nice cardie. You're looking quite smart, so you've obviously got that look between, trying to be a cool young teacher. You've got that nailed down quite well. This is just a guess on my part. I think he wouldn't mind a stab at the Bundesliga. Again, I don't know what challenge there is for him in the Championship. He's got a couple of 100 appearances under his belt now for Sunderland, most of which were in the Championship. I think he's proven everything he could do, everything he needs to at that level. Scotland, I'm not following it brilliantly, but from what I understand, I don't think Rangers are having a particularly good season. So there'd be pressure on him there to perform right from the start. There's going to be high expectations on him. Whereas if you're going to the Bundesliga, you're playing away from England, bit of a chance of a different experience, a different type of football. Maybe I'm overthinking things, but he is a Sunderland fan. So whatever the reasons, whatever has and hasn't happened with contract offers, he's probably a little bit upset that he's not got to start games for Sunderland in the Premier League. Maybe there's a bit of him thinks, I want a fresh start completely. Go somewhere different. Go somewhere where the life is different. The style of football might be different. And not forget about Sunderland, but not be in a situation where you're potentially competing against them or playing against them at any point. Just go somewhere new, see what that brings you. Come on, the Bundesliga is a fantastic standard of play. You're going to be coming up against big clubs. So presumably, if there is interest from the continent, you'd give it some thought and see how serious it was.
Yeah, Bomber, I'm going to jump back straight to you.
Yeah, so I am. I think I agree with Andrew in that the Championship isn't the way to go, particularly Coventry. I think it's Coventry and Hull that are the two that have been credited with interest for him. And I think there's too much history between Sunderland and Coventry in recent years for him to upset Sunderland fans, let's say, and go to Coventry because, there's this ancient fable of Jimmy Hill and the likes that means that we don't like Coventry. So I don't think that would necessarily be an option for him unless it was the only option on the table. But I actually think that the Bundesliga possibly isn't the right move for him, despite what Andrew's saying. And actually, I think the Scottish Premier League is absolutely made for Dan Neil to be a superstar in that division. I think it's a good halfway house, I think, between the Championship and the Premier League, in that the top end of the top 3-4 clubs in the Scottish Premier are probably better than Championship standard, and everything else isn't quite Championship standards. But such is the league and such is the competitiveness, particularly between the old firm clubs and now Hearts, obviously, that I think that's a real opportunity for Dan Neil to go and shine, go there for a couple of seasons and really make a name for himself and really kind of land himself on a little bit more of an international scene, I guess, because he'll be introduced to European football. It wouldn't surprise me if he moved to Rangers and it went well, how he wouldn't end up as Rangers captain. And there's a prospect there for a long and prosperous career away from Sunderland, far enough away that he's not constantly being compared to the Dan Neil at Sunderland or what Sunderland are doing. No chance of him necessarily competing against Sunderland unless, of course, like I said, our European push for Conference League comes to fruition. And like I said, he's got the ability to be a standout player in the SPL. And actually, Andrew, you mentioned that Rangers aren't doing so well. They probably didn't start so well. But as things stand, Rangers have won 6 of their last 6 league games, I believe. And they're on level points with Celtic and 6 points behind Hearts. So they're very much in a title race. They obviously, the European exploits haven't been going quite so well. But in terms of form and in terms of a time to join Rangers, I think January for the second half of the season, 6 points behind Hearts, having won the last 6 games is pretty spot on in terms of him to go in and make an immediate impact and possibly help Rangers, lift the SPL trophy. So I think at this stage, given the options that appear to be on the table for him, I think the SPL is by far and away the best one for him. But it does look, Johnny, you're right, that he'll be gone before January 31st, which will be sad. But it's quite clear when you've got like Chris Rigg getting more minutes than him, more appearances, it's quite clear how he fares, Dan Neil, that is, in the pecking order. And you're right, he's made 3 appearances. I think it's totaled 19 minutes, if what I've looked at is on. So it's quite clear that he's not going to be given too many more opportunities, even when you consider that he's only made those 3 appearances and half the lads of our centre midfield have been out at AFCON, and he's still not really had a look in. He's still not signed a contract. He'll be gone. And I think he'll be gone in January because the club will be loath to lose him for nothing in the summer. But yeah, it's sad because he's done so much for us. But there comes an end, I guess, to every story for every Sunderland player. And he'll be looked on fondly for a long, long time if he does go.
Bomber, that's very fair. I can see exactly why you'd think that Rangers might be a better fit for him. I'd just like to kind of back up what you've said about it will be sad to see him go. It looks 99% likely that he will be heading off very soon. I'd like to wish him all the best because I've got a lot of time for the lad. He's done really well for us. And he deserves to have a good career because it can't be nice when you're captain of the team, you're a regular first starter. I'm not saying he was a big head, but around the training ground, you've got that respect around you, that aura perhaps. So to then be on the fringes must be difficult. I'm sure everybody's spot on with him, but just I'm trying to think, how would I feel in a workplace if I'd, for all intents and purposes, been demoted, but still had to go in? There is a point where you perhaps feel as if you have to look elsewhere. And if that's Rangers, if that's the Championship or the Continent or whatever, I really hope he does well, because he's been at the club at their worst point and been a massive part in getting us back into some sort of position of hope and expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely echo those sentiments. I think it's a real shame the way things seem to be ending or seem to have ended for Dan Neil, depending on how optimistic you are about his chances of staying. But yeah, no, he's handled himself with complete class through the whole thing, I think. Certainly from a public facing point of view, and he's always been seen to be tightly knit with the lads all season, this season as well, despite being on the fringes. So yeah, if and when he leaves, he certainly leaves with with all of our best wishes. Another quick one, which we'll just mention in terms of academy players and transfers. Ben Middlemas has gone on has gone on a permanent deal to Swindon Town, 2.5-year deal. Obviously was part of the academy setup for a number of years at Sunderland and played a lot of football with the, the under 21s or 3s or 18s or whatever age group we're calling everybody these days. So obviously a move to, a club lower down the divisions, but still a football league club, League 2 Swindon, once managed by Paolo Di Canio, of course. So a little extra Sunderland connection there. And again, another player that I think we all wish well and hope to see succeed. Final transfer one that I want to just mention before we head for a quick break is one that is notable by its absence of discussion. So we've just, you two lads, more so than me, have just spoken very eloquently about the Dan Neil situation. Another player in a very similar but now quite different boat is Dennis Serkin. Dennis Serkin, a player who also has a contract that's expiring at the end of the season. Now, I thought it was quite peculiar that Serkin's name hasn't really been mentioned in press conferences or questions to Labris or to anybody at the club or to the player himself really over the past few weeks, even though he has now been involved in starting games for us competitively. So I'll chuck this one to you first, Bob, and then I'll come to you, Andrew. What do you make of the lack of noise around the Serkin situation? Do you think it's no news is good news, or would you rather have heard some updates? I mean, for me personally, I just think it's odd that such a high-profile situation hasn't been mentioned yet, but, there's only so many questions you can ask Labris, I suppose, and he's not really going to answer many of them anyway. So yeah, Bomber, what's your take on it, mate?
I think you're right, Johnny. It's a strange one because obviously Labris isn't going to volunteer that information and go, oh, by the way, lads, none of you asked me about Dennis Serkin's contract situation, so here's the latest on it. So it's either that the club have briefed journalists in some way in saying, look, this is what's happening with it, and journalists have thought that actually there's no point in reporting on it because it's not really of interest. If that is the case, then I'm sure the briefing would have been that he's going to sign a new contract, because otherwise there is a story in terms of where's he going to go, is he going to see the season out, is he going to leave in January? And actually, I think we've not heard anything, because I think probably there's been a plot twist in Dennis Serkin's Sunderland career, because we brought in obviously Ronaldo, and all of a sudden we were thinking, well, Dennis Serkin's not going to get a look in here in a month of Sundays, and we'd all pretty much forgotten that he was a Sunderland player. Such was the level of performance of the team, and particularly whoever sat in that left back position. Because let's not forget, Trey Humes moved over to there as well and has done fantastically well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you almost forget, or you almost got to a point where you forgot that Serkin was going to be an option. And yet over the Christmas period, he's come in, and I would say he's probably been one of our best players. In the games that he started in, he has been a completely different Dennis Serkin that I saw in League One and in the Championship. And it almost something, I don't know if it's the pace of the Premier League or like his mentality, because obviously he seems to be a very like spiritual, mental health focused type of person, and achieving his dreams of being a Premier League player has just kind of elevated him. I'm not sure, but that is a different Dennis Cirkin, and that the Dennis Cirkin we are seeing is a starting Premier League left back, in my opinion. And it's only just due to the fact that we've got such a good left back in Ronaldo that I'm not saying I'm not here going he should be starting every week, and if he goes he should be going for 20, 30 million. Whether that's him playing for a new contract remains to be seen. The Mo Salah trick. Or whether, like I said, we've not heard anything purely because the plan was we'll let him run down his contract, and if somebody wants to pay some money for him in January, they can. To all of a sudden, Jesus, Dennis Cirkin can do a very good job in the Premier League at the left back. Maybe we should be trying to sort something out for him. And those negotiations are now happening, albeit at the 11th hour, and we won't hear anything until something's signed. I don't know, but that's genuinely what I feel, that the plan was probably, if he goes, we're not really that bothered. But now it's, like I say, the narrative's changed, and I think the club probably would want to keep him where they possibly can.
Yeah, again, I really can't find much to disagree with there. I totally agree that the Cirkin that we've seen over the past couple of games, basically ever since the second half against Leeds, really is essentially a starting Premier League fullback. And you say about not selling him for 20 or 30 million. I think it would. You're looking at that level of money to replace him if you're trying to find an equivalent age of player with the same room for development and the same attributes. So I think it's a really interesting situation because there's gonna be big impacts, obviously, whether he stays or whether he goes. But Andrew, I'll come to you, mate. Where are you at with Cirkin? Do you agree with Bomber? Do you think he's sort of played his way back into the reckoning, or are you seeing it more of a, he's done a job when he's called upon, but we might need to move on?
No, I think he's done more than just a job. I think he's played extremely well in the main. He's looked as good a player as we thought we had in the Championship. Because there's been a long time now we've been waiting for Cirkin to be available in the Premier League, and we thought he could do it. I agree with Bomber. He's quite a spiritual, thoughtful lad, and maybe the fact that he's now reached his goal of playing in the Premier League is a weight off his mind. I don't know as well if it's a case of he's confident in his body at last, because he's kept breaking down lots and lots over the last couple of years. But we've seen this season, we've really taken it slowly with him. He started playing under-21s games at least, 5 or 6 weeks before there was any possibility of him being in the Premier League. So, it might just be that he's finally at a place where everything is right. Now, that's interesting what you have said there about how there's not a lot of chatter around him and his future, and perhaps there's been a quiet word in people's shells. If you remember, I think it was last week we were linked with that fullback from Real Madrid. That's gone very quiet now. It was a French international. His name escapes me.
Mendy. Was it Mendy? Mendy.
Yes. So, yeah, it could well be that the club have let people know off the record, well, we're not looking in this area. We think there's something to be done with Cirkin in terms of a deal. You mentioned there, Jonny, Ben Middlemass has gone. And it's an academy player moving to a League Two club. It's not going to be headline grabbing. But I do think it's important that if you're a young player and Sunderland are one of your options, and you look at Ben Middlemass and say, oh, okay, so he hasn't made it there, but they've given him a bit of a head start, and now he's got a deal at a club who were doing well in the top half of the division and pushing for promotion. You're going to think, oh, Sunderland are an option. And again, if you're a player who's maybe a bit further down the line, but you look at Cirkin, again, you go, Sunderland are an option because they do right by players. Cirkin has had a lot of injuries, but we've kept faith in him. We've looked after him. We've now turned him from a League One defender to a Premier League defender. That, again, matters. Sunderland's reputation matters when it comes to bringing other players in. And whether we know the details of any contract discussions, you can be fairly comfortable with the idea that behind the scenes, all parties know roughly where each other are at. Serkin's not turning up at the moment for training wondering, am I going to be offered a contract or what? There'll be some sort of word to him of, this is what we want to see from you, and if so, we'll talk about a deal, or we'll talk about a deal after the transfer window. He's not going to be there confused and not knowing where his future lies. There'll be something happening behind the scenes, and it's just so happens that we as the fans don't know about it. He's certainly not playing like somebody who's distressed or worried for the future. He's playing like a lad who seems pretty content with his lot. So, yeah, we might not ever find out the full story or the full timeline, but I think the people who need to know are presumably okay with what's happening with this situation.
Yeah, and I suppose either way, we're gonna know about it soon enough, aren't we? Because if he's still at the club beyond January, I think that's probably a good sign, isn't it, for Serkin's Sunderland future? We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll discuss some injury updates, and we'll get into Regis's pre-Crystal Palace, as we first black mark on my substitute teacher record, the pre-Crystal Palace press conference. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to How Are the Podcast news update episode. It's me, Jonny Hawley. I've got Andrew Smithson and I've got Bomber with us. So let's get into some injury chat. The headline news of which is obviously that Bertrand Traore and Arthur Masuaku have both come back from the African Cup of Nations carrying injuries. Now, as we are all very well aware, when the club gives injury updates, the timelines are not always set in stone. However, what we have been told is that both injuries are not hugely serious, and the initial prognosis is 4 to 6 weeks for the pair, I do believe. Gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong. Understandably, this is not great news because we've all seen how much of an impact the African Cup of Nations absences have had on us. So to get 2 of the 6 back that we can't use isn't great. And obviously as well, Bertrand Traore has made far more appearances for us than Arthur Masuaku has. So his absence is going to be felt more keenly than Masuaku's is. Regis was asked about this in the press conference. He, again, as usual, played it pretty, straight down the line with his responses. Nothing particularly detailed given away. Andrew, I'll come to you first on this one. So we obviously it's a shame the lads have picked up the injuries. The flip side of that is obviously the good news that none of the other AFCON lads to this date and this point as we record have picked up any injuries. First of all, how big of a miss are the lads going to be? And second of all, the other thing that Regis mentioned, well, I say he mentioned, he was asked whether the injury to Traore in particular was going to accelerate transfer movements. He, as usual, gave nothing away. Do you think it'll make any difference that these lads have come back with these injuries, or, with them just being 4 to 6 weeks, is it maybe not the kind of thing that you pull the trigger on the transfer market over?
Well, like you say, invariably when the club give timelines, you take it with a big pinch of salt, don't you? They're quite canny in how they break news and what they do and don't tell us. Lebris, we could have done with him down under in the Ashes, because like you say, he just plays everything with a straight bat, no risks, no slashing it onto his stumps or anything. He just plays everything right down the line, which is a skill. I mean, it's a skill in itself. I think it's different scenarios for the 2 players, because before going into the break, we've all pretty much agreed that Serkin has done an excellent job. And now the conversation is, does Serkin stay in the team or does Ronaldo come back? At no point during that discussion is anybody saying, well, however, we've got to find a spot for Masuaku. There was even a time when it was being rumoured that he was going to go out back to Turkey, I think. So that might throw a potential spanner in the works in that.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but also the latest reports that I'd seen were that, I forget the exact club, but a club in France were also reportedly after Masuaku as well. So it's, by the sounds of it, there's interest from a few places on the continent.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe this news changes that because the spot for that player that we thought we were going to free up and those wages we thought were going to become available are now having to stay with us for a bit. So that's a potential issue. But certainly in terms of the starting 11 at the moment, I don't think it impacts us. The Bertrand Traore one, though, is a blow. I mean, I know Diarra played on the right wing against Brighton for that 20-minute spell. I'm not sure he's going to be our option on the right.
No, I don't think so.
No. Traore was doing really well for us, and it's in the position that we've all said we need strengthening anyway. So yeah, it's a spot on the team that people feel there's room to improve. Well, there's even more room now because arguably our most consistent performer on that side of the pitch is missing. And yeah, I don't know who our short-term option is to replace him. I mean, in recent games, we've even had it where Hume and Mukiele are the most attacking option out on the right wing, and that's bound to have other impacts on the formation and the team. So we could have well done without that. Arguably, Masuaku is the player you were least concerned about being injured. In footballing terms, I don't mean as a person, that sounds nasty. But Traore is arguably going to be the hardest one to compensate for in the team. And I don't know if that escalates any potential deals for wide players. But what it certainly does is any selling club at the moment will be looking at that news and be chuffed a bit because they'll think, oh, well, we might be able to squeeze them for a bit extra cash now, which is a bit of a shame, really.
Yeah, hopefully none of those directors of football listening to this podcast. Otherwise, you're just giving them a few ideas, Andrew. Bomber, so same topic, right? Traore is obviously out for the near future. Same kind of theme of questioning on the transfer market. Do you see it accelerating things? But if we don't, pull the trigger any quicker on somebody, who do you reckon steps in? Because that's a big opportunity, surely, for somebody to make that right wing spot their own in Traore's absence, right?
Well, let's not forget that we've been without Traore for a good 4 or 5 games anyway, because he wasn't available because he was at AFCON in the first place. In terms of it accelerating anything in the transfer market, I don't think it does. I think the club the upper echelons of the club have proven over the last 12, 18 months that they will not be rushed into making any decision, let alone bringing forward and rushing a transfer decision by 2 or 3 weeks because of an injury to a player who we've gone without for 5 or 6 weeks anyway. I'm obviously echo the sentiments about Masuaku, so I'll get that ticked off first. It really pains me to say, but I think his Sunderland career is probably over before it's even begun, and that's only been exacerbated by the former Dennis Sirkin in his absence. Because, like I said, I would have Dennis Sirkin, Ronaldo, Trey Hume all on that left hand side as a fullback over him currently. And I'm not saying he's not a good footballer; he's a professional footballer. He's bound to be good, but the matches that I've seen him in for Sunderland haven't really led me to believe that he's going to be in there for the long term. He's certainly not going to displace Ronaldo. And like I said, I'd rather have Sirkin. So I do feel that the fact that there is transfer speculation about him already probably means that it's kind of over before it's begun. And just to correct you, Jonny, a Standard Liège in Belgium that have been credited.
Apologies,
So,
I've been done by the accent above the E on Liège.
Yeah, so it was Standard Liège. But yeah, so that's with Masuaku. Traore is a different story, as Andrew alluded to. But I do think the likes of Mayenda has done really well when been asked to play out in that position. Obviously, Chris Rigg has played out in that position, which I don't think is a position for Chris Rigg. I don't think he's dynamic, and dynamic's not the right word because he puts himself about. But in terms of like pace and willing to beat a man and to put a cross in, which is what we want from our wingers now, he's not there. He's not there. So you can see in the games that he has played out there, we've lacked any sort of real threat from an attacking perspective out there. And he does a job of sorts, but he's not a right winger. I like Mayenda out there in the short term. Let's not also forget that it's only going to be another week until we get Talby back. So there's a question mark as does Adingra then go out onto the right? I think there's enough options there to not be overly concerned that Traore is going to be missing for that period of time, because we've done okay without him. And at worst, we're going to be bringing back in an African Cup of Nations runner-up, potentially an African Nations winner, to sit in. All right, Talby might not play on the right, but to go and occupy one of those wing positions, which means, like I said, Adingra can go out onto the right, Mayenda can go out onto the right, Isidore can play out on the right if Bobby is going to continue to be starting through the middle. So I'm a little bit less concerned. I still think we will do business there because it is light of specialist right wingers, shall we say. But there's enough quality there, and I've seen enough of a performance from some of the people who've slotted in there for me not to be too concerned about it.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of sort of positive thoughts about these injuries and selection issues, we do have some more updates of players who are either back or about to be back. So Lebris confirmed in the press conference that obviously Traore and Masuaku injured, as we've just said. A knee problem for Traore and an ankle problem for Masuaku, I think. The flip side of that, like I say, is the other four are fit. So two of them are back in Reynaldo and Siddiqui, who Lebris has confirmed that both of those two are available for selection this weekend. Obviously, Siddiqui played against Everton in the Cup, but Reynaldo was held back just a little bit because they wanted to, just give him a bit of time, I think. Not quite as fresh as a 21-year-old Siddiqui who can devour blades of grass like nobody's business. But those two are available for Crystal Palace. And the other two, Talby and Diarra, as has been alluded to, are going to be, well, one of them is going to be involved in the African Cup of Nations final. The other one is going to be watching due to suspension. That's Diarra, who picked up a yellow card in the semi-final and therefore is ruled out of the final on disciplinary grounds. And Talby, I don't know if he's even seen the pitch yet in the tournament or whether he's just been on the bench. So possibly less than ideal for us that neither of them are likely to play much. But the two will be there as their nations, Senegal and Morocco, meet in the final of the African Cup of Nations this weekend, I believe. And they will be back after that. And I believe that Lebris, I don't know if he explicitly confirmed, but he basically said they're back for the next game after Crystal Palace. So we will have all of the lads back and we know what their availability is. The other update was that Brian Brobby is available this weekend after coming on and then going back off against Everton in the FA Cup. So yeah, we're probably as close to a full complement of players as we've been since the season started, I would say. Andrew, coming to you. With this new update in the availability of the squad, again, I mean, I know we've touched on transfers a lot, so I don't want to just make this the entirely transfer pod, but sort of where do you see that putting us now in a position to move into the second half of the season? So we know we're still in the FA Cup, and we'll touch on the FA Cup draw in just a minute, but we know we're still in the Cup. We know we've still got, obviously, a lot to play for in the league, and now we can see the lay of the land regarding availabilities and players who, by and large, we know who are either going to leave or stay. So we've talked about Neil, we've talked about Masuaku, we've talked about Patterson, and there are names like that throughout the squad who I think that their futures are pretty certain. Firstly, do you have us in a good position? Do you think we've got everything that we basically need? And secondly, if you're looking at, immediate priorities, where do you see it?
Well, I see for a fact that you're not a geography teacher because you managed to miss Belgium and France earlier.
Yeah, I'm taking that gold star off your chart, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I also say that I'm the little shit at the back of the class who thinks he's clever and thinks he's funny, when I'm just blatantly not.
Don't make us
So,
mention the big fat quiz of the year, Andrew. Don't make us do it.
oh, aye, aye, aye. Well, yeah, I noticed you were asked to present and not me after that absolute shambles. No, that just sorry, just pulling your leg there. No harm meant, mate. I think, yeah, we're shaping up really well because you made the point there that we're pretty much back, near enough back to full strength. And this probably is the strongest we've been as a squad since the first couple of weeks. And we've always, I mean, eh, you and Gav did a really good deep dive about the AFCON and how it could potentially impact us. And you did that because it was such a big talking point. Everybody, every conversation always went back to, we've started well, but in December and in January, it's going to be a problem because of AFCON. So we've always had this in the background, like, just creeping up. Oh, it's going to be absolutely hellish when this happens. But it hasn't. We've done just fine. We're still in a great position in the league. We've still got a load of confidence. So to be in that position and now be through virtually the other end of AFCON and have come through pretty much unscathed gives us a free run for these last few months. We're in a brilliant position in that if we don't sign anybody in the transfer window, we should still be fine. We've still got quality on the bench and good options, and everybody's going to be in a decent frame of mind. So I cannot wait for this second half of the season now. Everything that was thrown at us, the AFCON, the tough fixtures, you haven't played anybody yet. We've ticked all of them off. Now there's nothing anybody is saying about these upcoming months that would give you too much cause for concern. Yes, we still need to work hard and do all the things we've done so far, but I cannot see any major hurdles for us now. We've got a group of lads who have all done well so far at Sunderland. We're all going to be back together as one big group. They do seem to be like closely knitted together. There seems to be a good little atmosphere about them. I hadn't known that about Diarra being suspended. That's a bit of a shame for the lad because, playing for your country in the final of a major tournament is a lifelong ambition for some people. So that's a bit of a shame. Hopefully when he comes back, we're able to lift his mood quickly. I think Ronaldo has retired from international football now.
Yes, yeah. That story seemed to re-break this week after already having broken a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it was probably re-broken for me because I hadn't picked up on it the first time.
Well, when I say broken, it wasn't exactly splashed across Sky Sports News or Fabrizio Romano's Twitter feed. It was, some link that somebody found and put in our WhatsApp group, basically. But yes, that is correct. Ronaldo's retired now as at the end of AFCON.
Well, hopefully he's content with what he's done for his national team. He's proud of what he's done, but now he can focus purely on Sunderland going forward and trying to help the club get better. So yeah, I think the mind frame in general is good, and the squad is in good shape, and any players we sign are a bonus, and they can just take their time and work their way into the side without expecting to perform miracles from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree that the position that we're in, I think, is very, very good going into this second half of the season. You couldn't have asked for much better, could you? If you'd said to us all on whatever day it was, August the 16th or something, when the season started, where'd you fancy being on January the 15th? I think we'd have all snapped both your arms and legs off for this position.
Well, the answer is 16th or above, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But FA Cup, who cares about that, lads? Get us out in the third round. Well, put a pin in the FA Cup. But just before we mention that, Bomber, I'm basically going to ask you the opposite end of the question I asked Andrew, right? So Andrew's given a very good answer about the position we're in. and how even if nothing happens, he thinks we'll be all right. But Lebris was, like I said earlier, Lebris has been asked in this press conference today about multiple different players. Dan Neil, one very optimistic journalist asked him about Jan Paveda's future, which I thought was an interesting choice of question for Lebris when you're not going to be able to ask him much. And to his credit, Lebris took that question as seriously as he took the Dan Neil one, and that is to say he gave zero information about either of them. But the way that he answered the question was what interested me. He made specific mention of the fact that, like I said, there's not just players and clubs. Like, there's not just your player and your club involved. There's the other clubs, and there's agents, and there's all these different sort of third parties that have vested interest in transfers. And all of that is so quick moving and it all has to align. So I'm not conspiracy theory brained enough to think that means that we're definitely signing nobody because he's downplaying the chances. But with how thorough Sunderland have been with all of our recruitment and, the levels of scouting and due diligence that's done, how do you see that impact our January business? Do you think that we can react as quickly as maybe you need to do business in this window? Do you think it's going to, pose us any problems, or are you just cool, calm and collected about it?
I think for the first time ever, Jonny, or certainly the first time in recent memory, I am quite calm about it, because I echo Andrew's sentiments that actually if we signed nobody, even if we lost Dan Neil, Masuaku, and Paveda,
the big three.
Yeah, I think that we're fine, because let's not forget, Diarra is going to come back in, and all right, let's say we lose Dan Neil, Diarra is going to come back in, and we're talking about where's Enzo Lefebvre going to play? Is Diarra going to come back in? So if something happens to Siddiqui, Xhaka, or Diarra, Lefebvre's the first in line to go and sit back into that centre midfield. So I'm not really overly concerned there. Obviously, we've got Getroida as well, who can play basically anywhere, it seemingly. I've seen him play right wing back, centre back, centre half, and as you alluded to earlier, right wing as well. And does a job anywhere that he's put. So I'm really quite relaxed about it, and I think the club probably are as well, which means they're not going to be rushed into making signings just because, for example, as we've spoken about, someone like Bertrand Traore is injured for 6 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks or however long that actually means, reading between the lines. All the evidence suggests that the club are methodical and are planning these things kind of a year, 18 months, 2 years in advance. So our January transfer plans were probably written up in the summer. But come Christmas time, become that 0-0 draw at Man City, all of a sudden they're thinking, bloody hell, we got to rip these up and go back to the drawing board, because actually our prospects for the season are completely different. We're not signing people to move ourselves up the table from 16th up to 10th. We're looking at players who can firstly be better, or at least equal to the ones that we've already got, which in itself is exciting, because we've got more than enough cover that anybody you bring in has to improve your squad. And I think that's basically true for any January business, for any club. And secondly, like I said, we're now looking at what can we do? How high up the table can we finish in that top half? Not let's try and distance ourselves away from relegation, which I think puts us in a different pool in terms of how much we're willing to spend and the type of player that we're looking for. Because if we're looking to make January signings to help us move away from a relegation zone, you have to caveat that with, or balance that with, what happens if we go down and all of a sudden the money dries up and we do what many former Premier League clubs have done when they get relegated, is have to then fire sale everybody off because you can't afford to keep them in the Championship. Now that we're, all right, mathematically, we probably could still go down, but for all intents and purposes, we're not going to get relegated this season. I think the purse strings probably have loosened a little bit, and maybe there were 1 or 2 targets we might have penciled in should we stay up as summer signings this summer coming. Now maybe have been moved forward to say, well, look, actually, we think these can improve our squad, or would improve our squad if we stayed up. Let's move those forward to January and see how high up the table we can finish, and maybe pinch a 9th and 8th or 7th place and get Europa or Conference League football for next season. And then the snowball effect happens, because then you've got European money, you've got increased eyes on your players, you've got increased eyes from agents trying to get their players to play for you. So I think it's like a reap what you sow kind of situation. And it's just really exciting. And like I said, even if we don't sign anybody, I'm still really excited for what the second half of the season can bring. But because I'm that relaxed, and because I don't think we necessarily need anybody, I'm equally as excited to see if we do bring in somebody, who it is, because they're going to be very good. My assumption will be.
Well, that's it, isn't it? None of us really have a barometer anymore of what the level of player is that we should be signing. Like, it's all completely new to all of us. So, yeah, the excitement for if and hopefully when we get that first scarf picture, getting posted on social media, probably at some ridiculous hour of the night, and, everyone's had to stay up feverishly refreshing. Hopefully we get some indications of some really ambitious moves. But I do agree with you both. I think even if we don't sign a single player, I still think we're in a pretty good position. So it's nice. It's nice to have that level of security behind you as a Sunderland fan. It's not something we experience too often. Yeah, this isn't it. The final point from the press conference that I can't believe it's taken me this long to mention is that Labris was asked a question about Dan Ballard, who has won the North East Football Writers Association Footballer of the Year for the men's category. And I believe it was a Sunderland ladies player who won the female category as well.
Yes. It was Katie Kitchen, I believe.
Katie Kitchen, yes.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So congratulations to both of those, obviously, from all of us. And Labris was asked about it, and basically the question was, do you fancy waxing lyrical about Ballard for a minute? And he went, yeah, he's class and we all love him. God, you can tell this is a last-minute hosting job. How could I forget Mr. Sunderland himself, who I'm sure lots of people would have seen that people spoke to him after the Everton game, asked him if he's going anywhere, and he said he's going nowhere. Labris was asked the same question in today's press conference. He had the 09 quotes put to him, and he just responded, yes, we're in complete alignment. He's going nowhere. He's club captain and he wants to stay, and we want to keep him. So there's two Sunderland centre-halves who none of us would like to see sold anytime soon, and both of whom are going to be staying at the club for the foreseeable future, which is excellent news. Now, final point, Monday night before the Liverpool-Barnsley game was the FA Cup fourth round draw, and it's only the second time in the past decade that Sunderland have been involved in it. So, a bit of a novelty for me, sitting actually caring about the draws. It happened live, but happen it did, and we were drawn away from home against Oxford United in the fourth round. And it's a bit of a romantic one, because it looks like the ties are set to be played on Valentine's Day weekend, 14th and 15th of February. I'm getting some really positive feedback from Andrew and Bomber that you can't hear, listeners. It involves certain numbers of fingers, and I'll leave it there. Bomber, I'll come to you first. Oxford away, happy with that?
I mean, you can't not be happy with it, really. It does open up for a potential banana skin. I know if we go out of the FA Cup to a fellow Premier League side, you can just shrug it off. If you go out to a lower league side, even to a certain extent a Championship side, then you have to lick your wounds a little bit, and there's a bit of professional pride and a bit of I guess a kick in the teeth in terms of a missed opportunity. The FA Cup's a funny one because, by and large, I think we did the preview for the Everton game, and couldn't really care less whether we went through or whether we went out. Now all of a sudden, you're looking at Oxford and you're looking at the draw, and you know that there's going to be one of Liverpool or Brighton going out. You know there's going to be one of Villa or Newcastle going out. You've got ties such as Wrexham and Ipswich, and Burton and West Ham, and Burnley and Mansfield, and Port Vale and Bristol City, where you're looking at least one of those is going to go through. And you start thinking a little bit that there's an opportunity here to do something. And I think I don't think I'm alone in thinking, actually, like, as the the rounds tick over and as the draws happen, and as the days go on and lead up to Valentine's Day, you start thinking that there may be an opportunity there for us to have a little bit of a cup run and a bit of cup glory now that third round is kind of out the way. And I'm sure the club are thinking the same too. Once they've gone past what are we going to spend our 120 grand on for winning in the third round? And I think even the fourth round. So if you win the fourth round, it's only 127 grand. So, be wondering what they're going to spend that on. But once you get past that, there's a real opportunity. I say if the draw is favourable, there's been enough all Premier League ties in the third and the fourth round that you make it to the last 16. You've only really got to avoid Arsenal, Man City, and then one of Villa or Newcastle and possibly Chelsea. And if you can avoid them, you start to think that a trip to Wembley for a semi-final at least might be on the cards. So I think you spoke about Valentine's Day. I think the romance of the FA Cup is starting to creep back into my thinking a little bit. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think there's a lot of Sunderland fans who, having seen the emotion and the dramas of the Everton game, albeit an FA Cup third round, then see us draw Oxford away. And if we take it as seriously as we did the Everton game in terms of who we put out on the pitch, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't. I don't want to set myself up for embarrassment, but should fairly comfortably get past Oxford. On paper, we should. And then you start dreaming about it. So I've already got a little bit more of a vested interest in the FA Cup just from having watched that fourth round draw. Not just from us in terms of who we're playing, but the other ties around it makes it a more plausible reality that we can have a bit of a cup run.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm actually I'm scared to admit how much I agree, because I feel like if I say my actual thoughts about how we'll do in the cup this year, I'm going to get taken away by the men with the white coats and put in the room with the soft walls. But yeah, I think you're totally right when you point out the draw as well. When you do actually go through and look at the fixtures that have been played in the third round, being played in the fourth round, and what that means for the draw further on. This may be naivety because we never look at the draw very much because we're never in it, so we don't care. But it does feel like it's quite open. I do agree that there's, and even you say, oh, well, you've got to try and avoid Arsenal and Man City and whoever else. Yes, if you just looking at like, oh, we don't want them before we get to a semi or a final because we want to try and get there. But if you want to do something in a cup competition, you've got to play the best teams. And I mean, dare I say, Manchester City, Arsenal, Aston Villa and Newcastle, we've played all of those teams this season, and in at least one game against them, we've avoided defeat or beat them. So just something to chew on. Andrew, please either stop our ridiculous optimism in its tracks or inflate it massively with whatever you're about to say.
I'm going to inflate it massively.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm again going to be that annoying kid at the back of the class who thinks he's funny and try and make a joke about how a successful Valentine's Day might lead to a semi, because Bomber.
Hey, the innuendo's a Bomber's job, man.
Yeah.
My job.
I was impressed with your innuendos ahead of the Everton game, Bomber, and that gag there about the romance of the cup was absolutely chef's kiss.
That's why I'm here, mate. That's why I'm here.
Superb. But you were talking there about how our cup record, Bomber's been dreadful and all of this, and you're almost cautious to say you fancy our chances against Oxford because we could become the subject of an upset. But even Sunderland being beaten, then being classed as an upset, is progress for us in the cup, because for the last few years, nobody's raised an eyebrow at Sunderland losing.
Well, it wasn't that long ago that Oxford-Sunderland was a league game, was it? So I remember going to the Oxford away game and spending 3 hours trying to get out of the car park afterwards.
Yeah. We've played them in the league. I think we played them in the League Cup under Phil Parkinson fairly recently, and we lost that on penalties. But yeah, we'll now be seen by them as a bit of a glamour tie. presumably it'll be on the TV, a Premier League team going away to a championship club. That's the type of thing they like to show. Yeah, there will be a load of people having to butter up their partners and say, I will do something on the night time, but I want to watch the match beforehand. There'll also be a load of partners thinking, how the hell am I going to get the sign off for potentially 2 weekends in London towards the end of the season? So, there's going to be a lot of people putting in the groundwork in February thinking, I'll just play my cards right here because I might need to get a pass out for later on in the summer. But in all seriousness, I was chuffed that we took the Everton game seriously because our poor form in the Cups has annoyed me. And look at what it's done already. It's a tough game against Oxford, but we're already looking at the draw and thinking, oh, well, if this happens and that happens, there's a potential route. So you never know. And it is really important that we remember all of these big draws or these potential big draws that we could end up with if we do progress. We've shown we don't need to be scared about them. We've given every team above us in the league a scare. So why not go for it? The mood at the moment is really high amongst the club, and we are, as football supporters, meant to get carried away. Bomber, you said you're starting to dream about it, and Jonny, you're saying you daren't even say it just in case it's thrown back in your face. But how many times recently have Sunderland fans joked about let's get carried away? We are allowed to get carried away and hope for the best, and you never rule anything out with this club. So I'm dead excited about that game. I can't wait for it. And yeah, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I've said it a few times this season, but we've gone from the club of why us to the club of why not us? And the FA Cup's no different. Why not us, eh? If we can put a run together, anything's possible. And I do believe that is the last item of news that we have to discuss today. So that leaves me with not much else to do other than to say thank you very much to everybody who's tuned into this episode. I apologise profusely for the fact that I've had to host it. So, Luke O'Nien, I give you a heartfelt apology. I should have mentioned you first. Dan Ballard, I'm sorry for not mentioning your big award win earlier. Anyone else?
It's not an Oscars speech, mate.
Yeah, anyone else who wants one, just write in to the podcast. But no, in all seriousness, thank you very much to Andrew and to Bomber for joining us. Thank you to everyone for listening. I can not give you the rundown of all the content that's coming up in the next few days with the kind of accuracy that Gav and Chris usually do, but I can tell you that there was a podcast published, an opposition preview with a Crystal Palace fan who Chris interviewed. So go and give that a listen. There'll obviously be a match preview coming out the morning of the game. So Saturday morning, there'll be a match preview pod, and there'll be there's a podcast that'll be getting recorded post full time, and that'll be coming out on the Saturday afternoon/evening. And I'm fairly confident in saying that there'll be a Sunday morning, debrief, Sunday supplement pod, whatever it's being called these days. Guests? Good question. I'm not sure. Tune in and find out. But yeah, in all seriousness, like I say, thank you very much, Andrew.
Class. Absolutely class. Really enjoyed that, lads, both of yous. Thanks very much.
And thank you very, very much to Bomber.
Thank you, Jonny. Pleasure as always, my friend. And you did an all right job. I'm sure Gav will be pleased.
I'll take all right. I'm going to put that down in writing. Okay, I'm time stamping it.
Gav won't be pleased. Gav will be worried. Gav will be very, very worried now because there's somebody hot on his heels.
Well, he's welcome to have the host chair back at the first opportunity if he'd like it. I think I'll give myself a few weeks off. But
if it makes you feel any better, then Gav wouldn't have been able to pronounce Standard Liège or know that it was a French club. It was a Belgian club anyway.
If nothing else, we're at least on equal footing. Thank you very much to everybody for tuning in. Please keep up with all the content on the Roker Report website, rokereport.sbnation.com. There's all of the usual articles coming out, pre-match, post-match, talking points, tactical deep dives, player ratings, opinion pieces, and all the rest of it. As I've already said, keep listening to How the podcast episodes every single day, sometimes more than once a day. give us 5-star reviews on Spotify and all the rest of that jazz. You know, click all the good buttons and keep listening, keep supporting Sunderland, and look after yourselves. And bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.